So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. We're going to have a career panel with some alumni, and I'm going to kind of popcorn around to them. So I will start. My name is Cindra Rehman, and I graduated from George Mason, I think it was 2001. It's been quite a journey since then. So we're going to start with share your journey since graduation. How did your transition from the Carter School degree to your current career? What unexpected twists and turns did you encounter? And how did your education prepare you for these challenges? The question is in the chat, and we're going to popcorn it around. To all the panel members, so John DeRosa, would you like to begin us off and then popcorn to someone else?
Hi, everyone. John DeRosa here. I think I graduated in 2019 from the PhD program. It's all fuzzy at this moment. It might have been 2019. I now work at Amazon Web Service as a principal product manager technical, working in secure connections for the cloud. So my career drastically changed from while I was pursuing my degree, I was working at the Pentagon and then finished my dissertation research while assigned in Germany, working for the government. And then I got an offer to work at Amazon after a fellowship. And now I'm working in tech. So my career has drastically changed from the trajectory that I was on. And I think the questions that we will dive into today, and I won't spend too long, but the questions that we'll dive in today, I think are representative of the change and adaptation that the Carter School prepared me in this new career. So let me pass it over to someone that I do know. Sandra, had a few classes with Sandra along the way.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. My name is Sandra Tombe, and I graduated or defended my dissertation November 2021, so relatively new. And I focus on the transnational mobilization of diaspora communities by non-state actors. So I work with Terrence Lyons was the chair of my dissertation committee. Thomas Flores was on my committee. And then, oh my gosh, Jennifer, whose last name I'm blanking on, from the Carter School, from the Shar School, was on my committee. So I have great memories of being at the Carter School and remember a number of faces from there. My trajectory has been, so far, I guess it's been short from when I graduated to what I'm currently doing. So I'm a research program officer with the Learning Evaluation and Research team at U.S. Institute of Peace, where I support colleagues with research design and methodology and research ethics. So really using the technical aspects of being in a doctoral program and applying that to peace building, to supporting projects around research relating to gender inclusion, for example, projects around climate change. So being able to support colleagues on that front has been very exciting for me. So I enjoy what I do very much, and I look forward to sharing a bit more as we get to engage in this conversation with you. I will turn it over to Lisa.
Hello. Yeah, so I started at the Carter School, I guess, as many of us did before it was the Carter School, obviously, and in 2014 and finished in 2020. So on my committee, I did the PhD program, and on my committee were Leslie Dwyer and Susan Hirsch, whose mentorship was so important to me during this time. My research focused on collectives of mothers of migrants from Central America who had gone missing during their journey. So the migrants had gone missing, and I was following these collectives of mothers as they were engaging in transnational activism and supporting each other, creating networks of care and support among one another. That became not only personally significant, obviously, for PhD research, but it really shifted where I ended up professionally. So now I am an assistant professor in Canada. I'm from Canada at a small liberal arts college in London, Ontario. But I'm not in peace studies anymore. I'm in a field called Thanatology, which is the study of death, dying, grief, and loss. And so it was the aspect of my doctoral research that focused on grief and this idea of grief activism and how grief can translate into a foundation of solidarity and social change and social movements. That's what led me to this role that I'm in now. So no, I wouldn't have anticipated ending up. I didn't even know there was such a thing as the field of thanatology before I saw the job ad. But it's one of those great aspects of, I suppose, interdisciplinary theorizing and study where we can bring together such interesting backgrounds. So a lot of the people that I work with in my department are social workers and nurses. They work on areas including palliative care and some of these areas that I would never imagine that I would be working alongside colleagues that are focusing on that. But they brought me into the department to bring in a more political and sociological lens focused on the social justice dimensions of grief and loss. So I found, I think, a really nice home here. Yeah.
Have you been a mentor to others or benefited from mentorship? Share how mentorship has impacted your journey and the importance of giving back by guiding the next generation of graduates. Let's start with John DeRosa.
If I can find the mute button. I've been mentored into trying to find the mute button on these things. No, absolutely. Mentoring has got me where I am today, and in fact, just finished our annual performance evaluation process. And one thing that my senior manager recognized was the mentoring that I currently do, and asked that I expand that beyond our team to others' teams. I'm a product of mentorship, whether it was Solon Simmons or Sarah Cobb mentoring me through the program. Along the way, my reader was a mentor that I had at the Pentagon, and she also mentored me at the National Defense University. And then getting into Amazon, I relied on a lot of my mentorship because I was making a significant leap from working for the government to going into big tech. And I sought the counsel of senior leaders that were my mentors in the government to make sure I was making the right choice. And even today, it's kind of weird, and you probably can tell I'm a little bit more seasoned than my co-panelists. The dynamic has changed where previously I sought out mentors, and where now people are reaching out to me, and I'm happy to. I support dissertation committees at the Carter School, so I stay affiliated in that sense. So that's been very helpful to see the next generation of academic leaders come out of the Carter School. But in my current job, mentoring is a way that I can give back. So why don't I pass the popcorn bowl over to Lisa?
Yeah, as you said, mentorship is the reason, I suppose, probably why all of us are where we are now. Certainly through a PhD program, mentorship is so very important. And so you know, Leslie and Susan were really instrumental in mentoring me during the dissertation and also afterwards in terms of providing career advice and writing letters, and all of that is so important. I didn't mention in the last note was that I actually had a kind of a postdoc experience at Notre Dame. I was at the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies as a visiting research fellow there for a year, but this was like right in 2020. I arrived there in August of 2020. So that whole year was a little bit complicated by the pandemic. But one of the people there that was really important for mentoring me, especially on the job market, the academic job market, was George Lopez, who just was so kindly took me under his wing and trained me in how to do job talks, which made an impact because I got the job that I'm in right now. I think largely because of the excellent career training that they provided at Notre Dame, which was wonderful. And in terms of mentoring others now, I'm really focusing a lot more on collaborative research projects, and I really like working with young people. So this past year, I worked with even some high school students who had gotten involved, created their own activist movement here countering Islamophobia in our city in London, Ontario, after a really violent incident happened in our city a couple of years ago. And we worked together on the project and we published together. So just recently published a chapter that I co-authored alongside these high school students, which I do see as a part of mentorship, and just it was a really wonderful collaborative experience. So that's what I would say. How about you, Sandra?
I have definitely been mentored. I've tried to recently mentor others, and I work in the federal government as a partnership coordinator for the Forest Service, and there are a lot of new federal employees that are just starting out and not really sure, you know, anything about the government. And so I kind of help them and guide them through the government process because it's kind of a totally different entity than, you know, working for anybody else. You have to really understand a lot of government nuances. And it can be really rough when you start out and you don't really understand anything. So I love giving back like that to the next generation of graduates. And I would love to even find more if there's anybody in the audience that needs a mentor. Please reach out to any of the panelists. I'm sure we could help you with whatever. And I'm going to popcorn it over to Sandra.
Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, I think similar to what John and Lisa have shared, I think I've been mentored and I continue to be mentored, and I'm now having opportunities to mentor others as well. I have to say my committee has been instrumental for me throughout the PhD program, and they continue to be. Terrence has reviewed a number of projects that I wanted to get published, but if you're familiar with the publication process, it takes forever, and you most often get a rejection first before you get anything else. But just, Terrence being there to look at some of these papers and provide me feedback has been very, very instrumental. I'm very grateful for him and for his continued mentorship to me. I have to say too, I've been very fortunate as someone who was a research assistant. I was on campus pretty much all the time, and I had the privilege of getting to connect with other faculty who were not part of my committee, people who I wasn't a TA for example, and that was a huge advantage for me. Susan Allen is one of my closest mentors. She's someone I've never worked, well, I did work for her as a research assistant, so I take that back, but she was never formally part of my committee, right? But she continued to mentor me and to provide guidance, to just help with career conversations, providing guidance, and just be providing an ear to hear, what I'm processing and what I'm going through. So I highly encourage students to seek opportunities and relationships with those who may be studying similar questions to you, but also those who may completely be interested in other things, right? But who could still provide insights and guide you in ways that you may not be able to see or not be able to seek. So I highly encourage that. In my role now as a research program officer, I get to support our civic engagement and scholarship team, which is geared more towards engaging the US general public. And so a lot of the work that they do focuses on mentorship, especially with graduate students. So I get to mentor 2 graduate students now as part of that program. And I really enjoy that. So having those opportunities and feeling like I'm growing professional to a point of having something to offer others is important. And then one thing I would add in terms of being mentored, for those of you who may have known Adomi, who was my office mate while I was in the PhD program, Adomi was just like an amazing mentor to me as well. I don't think I wouldn't say it was peer mentorship because I don't think I offered him anything, but he offered me a ton. And so I'm very grateful for that. So think of people you share offices with, people you share spaces with, and just the value of those relationships. So that could also be mentorship that could, where you can offer value and where others could offer value to as well.
Awesome. Are there any questions for the panelists? Okay, we're going to move on to global opportunities and cultural adaptation. How have you learned to work in different countries or with diverse teams? Share stories about adapting to new cultures, embracing diversity, and leveraging international experiences to advance your career. Discuss the ways you've been prepared to embrace diversity and inclusion in your career and industry. How have you contributed to creating more inclusive environments? And what advice do you have for promoting diversity in the workplace? I'll start this one off. My job was originally with the Forest Service, this time in the diversity development and outreach team. And it recently transitioned to just the partnership support team because my director of the National Partnership Office said, well, you know, with the administration changing, we may not be able to say the word diversity anymore. So our whole team changed its name, and we actually are changing everything that we're doing right now. We're trying to think of it as, you know, diversity and equity should be like, you know, we're looking through everything with a diversity lens, but we're not necessarily focusing on diversity. And I've learned through being in this team that it has a lot to do with the language that you speak on a daily basis, and whether you're sensitive about that language, and how much you are kind of self-aware about that language. So I've learned a lot about promoting diversity, and now we kind of have to try to promote diversity without saying the word, which is, you know, challenging in the government. So I'm going to popcorn it over to John.
So for me, I think up to this point, while working in the military and working for the government, the diversity was and the international experiences often was contained to working with allies alongside allies and partners on separate teams, right? I've, you know, all across Europe, Middle East, Balkans, in support of operations. But in those situations, there was a lot of, there was working alongside those allies and partners from other countries, but they weren't directly on your team. But now at Amazon, on my team specifically, we've got non-US citizens from India, Korea, Mexico, Ireland. And got to be honest, the equation has flipped for me in that they are the owners of a technology domain that I am not the native speaker of, right? They are the native speakers of this particular domain. And so everything I learned, I studied narrative was my focus during my studies. And so a lot of the narrative techniques that of particularly about asking questions and listening that Sarah had taught me along the way become extremely valuable, because listening in this environment becomes probably the single most important thing to promote that diversity, and being able to hear my teammates who when I'm the non-native speaker of this technology domain. How about you, Lisa?
I suppose we can imagine this obviously in an academic space in so many different ways in terms of the kinds of voices and perspectives that are represented in our curricula and student body and the composition of faculty and publication collaborations, all of these different kinds of aspects. And so it really needs to be integrated into all ways that we approach knowledge production and dissemination within the university. So certainly this is a part of everyday life in a university, and considering whose voices are represented, whose voices are erased, perhaps, and trying to remedy those historic and ongoing injustices in our practice. I know for our university in particular here in Canada, part of this responsibility has to do with meeting the recommendations of the 2015 Truth and Reconciliation Report on Indian residential schools in this country. And so now we're looking at very much closely as all institutions across Canada at decolonization, at indigenization practices. I'm involved in a decolonization advisory circle where we get together with Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers to consult and provide insight on ongoing practices within the university and on developing relationships with Indigenous nations where we are located here in London, Ontario, and that's been really important. So for example, one member of the advisory circle is holding a From Turtle Island to Palestine film festival that I'm going to be attending tonight. So there's a number of steps that are being taken to really develop those relationships with communities here and try and actually meet those recommendations that were set out in Canada's 2015 TRC. That's just so essential for our everyday work here. Sandra, what about you?
I have definitely learned a lot. I actually was in the Peace Corps in Comoros, and I studied overseas in Eastern Europe in college. And I think traveling is always like very beneficial in learning to work and live in different countries. You learn so much about different cultures and embracing diversity. So if any of you have opportunities to travel or, study overseas, always try to pursue those. I would, that's my advice, because you learn so much more than you ever imagined. So let's move on to the next question, if there's not any other questions. Here's one about embracing change and uncertainty. Reflect on a significant change you've experienced post-graduation, such as changing careers, pursuing further education, or moving to a new location. How did you approach the uncertainty And what advice do you have for recent graduates facing similar situations? Overcoming imposter syndrome and self-doubt. Many graduates experience imposter syndrome as they start their careers. Share moments when you face self-doubt and how you've overcome it to achieve your goals. And I'm going to start with Sandra this time.
Thank you. That is a difficult question, mainly because the biggest change for me has been moving from academia to a non-academic environment. And I would say that that was a big culture shock to adjusting to a place that did not run along the academic calendar, where research wasn't, what you're doing all day and night, and you're engaging with colleagues who have different interests, who have different kinds of projects they're working on. Not everyone who's working on a project is by definition working on a research project. And so just understanding those differences and adjusting to that change was, I would say, the biggest change, or the biggest thing I had to adjust to after graduating from the Carter School. In terms of imposter syndrome, I think that is a real thing that I've experienced to some extent, and it's mainly because I've been geared for so long towards academia that, to land in a place where I wasn't in an academic setting was quite an adjustment. But I think you realize that after a while, you realize that you do have the foundations to be where you are and to do the work that's before you. And so just relying on the skills that you've gained and the experiences that you've had have been very, very important for me in terms of instilling in me the trust and the confidence that I need to be able to carry my work. And I think it's a hump that you have to get over, and different people get over it differently. And I think for me, it's tapping into the networks that I have, relying on the network that I have, people who know the skill sets that I have and how I've been able to use them in the past have been very critical to helping me get past that point and to realize that I do have something to offer and I can do the task that's before me, if that makes sense. I'll pass it over to Lisa.
Yeah, I think the question of how to overcome imposter syndrome is, I couldn't speak to that, because I think that many of us carry this with us, as you've mentioned, for a long time. I was just at a research awards gala last night, and one of my colleagues at the university was receiving a career award for having, contributed so much to her field in social work. And she went up to accept the award and started her speech by saying that when she was initially informed of the career award, that she didn't want to accept it unless she could hear who had nominated her for that award. And then she found out that, in fact, it wasn't just one person who nominated her, it was many people who nominated her. And she said because of that, that was one of the few reasons why she was willing to even stand up and receive this award, which is incredible, as a woman who has done so much for her field and has published so many books and has really opened up new ways of understanding lived experiences and so on. And so, it's very unfortunate to think that we might carry these kinds of feelings of imposter syndrome for a very long time. But I think academic work in particular can be such that you were exposed to rejection on a regular basis, and people are judging your work and may not always agree with your approach, or you may have things to say about your journal articles or what have you. So we face a lot of critique and criticism and rejection as a part of academic work. And I think for that, it's I don't know, it's a process of being able to build up the internal kind of capacity to receive that feedback and to be able to continue on. I know that this is my third year. I'm just finishing my third year teaching full-time at the university that I'm at. And this is also the first year where I really started feeling like I was kind of coming into my own and feeling more confident in the work that I was doing as a teacher. as a researcher in this space, more as a fully fledged academic and not just somebody who recently finished their PhD. But that said, obviously, this is not the end of the line in terms of overcoming imposter syndrome. So I'm not sure. I think it is a process and experience, and I think the mentorship plays a big role in terms of receiving good feedback from people and people being very supportive, reminding you to keep track of all of those achievements that you've had and all of the good feedback that you've received alongside some of the more critical feedback that you've received is important. I mean, those kinds of things. So I don't know. I don't have a magic bullet for that. I still struggle with it. John?
Yeah, and I recognize some of the questions that Matt is answering in the chat, which is kind of relevant to the uncertainty of switching careers. I had spent 30 years in the Department of Defense as a soldier, officer, civilian, and then jumped into tech. And frankly, and then, after the first year that I'm in tech, massive layoffs are happening. Let me tell you, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and the security that I lost while working for the government, that security blanket I had went away rather quickly. I remember I was in minus 18 degrees in Fairbanks, Alaska, putting in a system for a customer there, and they were making announcements about layoffs. I was insecure and uncertain about my future. But Matt, your questions about PhDs, applying your degrees, and outside of traditional sense, I gotta be honest, the interview that really solidified my my coming to Amazon was with the director that hired me, and we spent over an hour. He interviewed me when Russia had just invaded Ukraine, and he was aware of my background, and we had an entire conversation about conflict resolution in international relations as compared to conflict resolution at Amazon. And at Amazon, I mean, at Amazon, there's, it's a peculiar culture. When they see that you have a PhD, they immediately assume it's a engineering or computer science degree. But then they forget the fact that most of my day, and I know Cindra can probably acknowledge this in the government as well, because most of my day is spent in conflict resolution. And so one of the peculiar mechanisms at Amazon is a term called escalation. And we were talking about escalation in my interview to get hired, about the difference between escalation in armed conflict and escalation at Amazon. And escalation in armed conflict obviously, leads to tragedies and loss of life and destruction. It's generally we're reticent to go there. At Amazon, escalation is how you solve problems. They encourage you to escalate. If we can't come to an agreement between teams, we just go to the next level. But there's a interesting leadership principle called disagree and commit. Is once we have voiced our disagreement and our concern, and we're supposed to be very vocal about our disagreements, we're not to hold back about our disagreements. But as teams, once we've disagreed, but a course of action has been decided on, we all commit, and we don't commit haphazardly. We don't commit reluctantly. We're all in to deliver on behalf of this team. So yes, Matt, to your question, conflict resolution is a daily dynamic. of my job here at Amazon, it was working for the government. And so, yes, there is applicability. And I would, Matt, if you want to talk offline, please reach out. I'll certainly pull this thread a little further. Sandra Tombe, or have you respond? I don't know. I've talked too long. I don't know where we are in the answer Q&A.
I have, but I'll just add to your response to Matt's question, especially the part on going back and getting another degree. I don't think it's a matter of getting another degree that's more marketable. It's about marketing the skills that you have, because I think our field is very relevant. And to John's point, it's about being able to articulate it in a way that resonates with these different areas where you're trying to pivot. So adding another degree isn't necessarily the solution. It's thinking about how to best present yourself for these areas that may seem at the surface as unrelated, but you have to think of what are the underlying skills that they're looking for, and how does my skill set meet that, and try to speak to those.
Awesome. So I would definitely reiterate what Sandra and John were saying about Matt's question. But let me just say, his question was, some of the recent graduates from the Carter School these last couples of years find it very hard to get a job in our field, especially PhDs. Some are thinking of going for other studies and get a more marketable degree. What would you advise them? Are there any other comments on this? Oh, go ahead, John.
Yeah, if I could, I don't know. Back when I was still in school at Carter School, that seemed to be the same question back then. I don't know. That this is not a new question. I think we have been, as a field, exploring that question and how, and so I think the Carter School, certificate programs, a bunch of other things that they've introduced to try to get, but I think I agree with you about, it's not a marketable degree. It's 100%. It's the marketable skills that you have. You're, as a PhD researcher, you've got tremendous skills in researching. As a product manager, just quickly, as a product manager, some of the most important facets that I've pulled from my school, my time at the Carter School, was about narratives. And as a product manager, user stories and user pain points and user objectives. That's what I did my dissertation on. What two nations, what were their preferences in making choices about nuclear arms control? That was my dissertation, right? And getting to the root of what these users, their stories, what is the narrative about what makes them tick and what matters to them. That's centerpiece of my job here at Amazon as a product manager. So it is, I think I'm 100% in agreement with, it's about marketing your skills rather than the degree.
Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, so in terms of, yeah, the academic job market has been pretty terrible for a long time before we started, and it's not getting any better. That's certainly true. It's really difficult to get jobs in universities. I'd just like to say that I am teaching now. I have a full-time academic job. I feel very lucky in this because I don't think that this was a typical experience, nor solely due. I work quite hard for it, of course, but there is luck that is involved in it. It was really a position that was quite almost tailor-made for me. And I fit perfectly into this spot. And so I don't think that my experience in getting this job is necessarily completely typical. I can say for most of my friends in peace studies, either in Canada or in the US, from different institutions. So people who graduated from the Carter School or people who graduated from different universities in Canada in peace studies. Very few have gone on to teach full-time. A lot of people, most of the people that I know either work in research institutes, non-governmental organizations, community organizations doing direct work, peace building work in their communities. And a lot of people are doing absolutely fabulous work with really interesting organizations, like thinking of one of my colleagues from the Carter School that I graduated with ended up at the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security. Jessica Smith is doing absolutely fabulous work over there as a research director. I have another friend who graduated in Canada from a peace studies program in Canada here and is now at the Romeo Dallaire Institute for Children, Peace and Security. Julie Hyde, who is also a research director there. So I suppose, like, obviously for those of you who are going into this, who are doing your PhDs and who are not wanting to exit, or sorry, who are wanting to exit academia, these kinds of opportunities would be clearer, right? But for me, when I was doing my PhD, I always wanted to be an academic. I wanted to teach. I really enjoy teaching. And so it was a great source of pain and insecurity during those times, especially at the end of the PhD, when I wondered if all of this work was for nothing, if I won't ever actually be able to do the one thing that I really want to do, which is teaching. So I feel really lucky to be in the position that I'm in now. But it's also raised a lot of questions for me in terms of really during those times of insecurity of having to sit down and think of what are the aspects of this that I actually do really want to do, that I get a lot of benefit out of, that would make my life, that would really, I would drive some sort of personal benefit from that kind of work. And so teaching is a part of it, but I also had to consider, other kinds of options where, maybe I would have to consider teaching on the side, sessional teaching, these kinds of things. I would like to point out, I do have this position, but I'm not tenure track yet. I am still on contract. So it is full-time, but it's not tenure track yet. So I still have in front of me that possibility that, budget cuts or whatever, this kind of dream position that I'm in might come to an end, and I have to consider other opportunities. So that has been a source of absolute, honestly, absolute stress and distress. But also I now feel like I'm in a position where I had to confront some of those fears and say, if I have to walk away from this career and to do something else, what configuration of work would still meet some of those personal goals that I have of being able to teach or engage in teaching in some kind of a way. And it might look very different from what it is right now. And it's just, unfortunately, with the state of the academic job market, that's the way, unfortunately, it is.
I said I wasn't going to pipe in here, but I feel very passionate about this particular conversation. Number one, because as what everybody's saying is true, it's not unique to peace and conflict studies. Academic job markets, which span the disciplines, are now and have always been challenging to get. You'd have to go back 50 years probably to find easy to get professorates. But also on the flip side, I was extremely motivated by what Sandra said, in that it's about how you market what you've been given. And John did a fantastic job following that up too. Oh, and sorry, one more thing about the academic job market. I would actually argue, and I think that we could have a debate about this because there probably have not been studies done, but I would actually argue, as far as the numbers go, that peace and conflict studies as a PhD is actually easier to get a professorate than some other jobs that are being, that every school in the country or on the continent has offerings for, the other liberal arts like anthropology, sociology. Where when I was in my master's degree, getting my master's in anthropology, a professorate would open up and you'd get 250 applications for one job, right? So it's going to be challenging, and we are among the only higher education institutions in the country offering peace and conflict studies. So we're going to get, you know, the pick of the litter, as it were. Though I'm not trying to retract from anything that Lisa said, because she was spot on in what she was saying. The other thing, and I wanted to just like give an anecdote about the job market. I am presently hiring for a job that I cannot seem to give away. I've interviewed, I don't know how many graduates of the Carter School, and they all won't take this job because they're all happily employed. Like they all have jobs. And so I can't, like, I basically went through this list of like my top past students, and I call them all, and they all have fantastic jobs, and they don't even want to hear what I have to say. And so there's always been this sort of pessimism around the Carter School of, oh, what are we going to do when we get done? And then everybody winds up getting fabulous jobs anyways. Like I am not aware of one Carter School graduate that's just sitting unemployed in their parents' basement at present. Like we're all out changing the world. So yes, it's challenging. Yes, it seems hard, especially when you get kicked out of the nest. But brighter days are ahead as long as you're willing to sell what you have, which is the top conflict resolution degree that's offered in the United States.
I'd also like to chime in. I got a job as a grants management specialist in the government. And I did that because of my conflict resolution skills, and basically seeing that I have a master's degree in conflict analysis and resolution from George Mason, they knew that I could basically resolve any conflicts that came up. Like that was a given for them in the interview. And that, on your resume, that little line on your resume, it just speaks volumes to, your character, your personality, everything about you and how you're going to be professionally. So let's go on to the next question in that kind of realm. Effective communication and collaboration is the next question. Strong communication and collaboration skills are vital. Share experiences from team projects, client interactions, or leadership roles, highlighting how you've honed these skills post-graduation. So let's start with Sandra this time.
Thank you. So being part of an institute that is large enough where you have different centers that are divided into different teams, you naturally need to have good communication skills. Being part of my particular team where we work across the institute to support all projects around research design, monitoring and evaluation, and project design, all of those are, and monitoring and evaluation, all of those are components where we don't get to work alone. We work with our teams that are actually doing the projects, doing the work in the different countries where we work. So a lot of our day-to-day entails communicating with teams, working with them and meeting with them to design a monitoring framework, for example, or to go over a research protocol that a team is designing. And so being able to communicate as a team to understand who's supporting what project and what tasks we're working on to ensure that all of the Institute's needs are met, but also being able to communicate across teams to understand the needs of our colleagues to ensure that whatever frameworks we're helping them design is actually meeting their needs and speaking to the objectives of the project. And so I think, I remember when, not just from the Carter School, I think it took me a while to appreciate the value of teamwork. But once I did, and once I understood the value of that and the value of being able to communicate well and effectively, I've become a fan of team projects and of working collaboratively. And you realize that there's a lot of value that brings into projects in terms of strengthening them and ensuring that you have multiple perspectives that come into it. So one aspect to kind of relating to the conversation earlier around efforts around diversity and how we ensure that we're bringing in multiple perspectives. I think being an effective communicator and being able to work with different teams has been instrumental because you're able to allow in in my case, I'm able to allow in different perspectives that help strengthen our research projects, that help strengthen monitoring and evaluation frameworks that my team supports our colleagues with. And so I can't like, and it's, communication is important and it's been valuable for my work. So that's what I'll say at this point. And I'll turn it over to John.
Well, I think what I'll do is talk about two sort of dynamics here at Amazon and where that communication and collaboration requires. Number one, as a product manager, the last thing you want to hear, but it's generally the first thing you want to hear, is you're going to have to be scrappy about that. And what that means is they're not gonna give you anyone. It's just going to be you. And until you prove, in this case, until you prove business value, it's just going to be you. And so collaboration then becomes key, and reaching across. You know, in the past 3 years now here at Amazon, I've not only recruited across Amazon Web Service, which is the part of Amazon I work across 10 vice president organizations, which is pretty significant. But I often have to reach out to other companies within Amazon to help solve some of these problems. So being scrappy, just this one thing, demands a culture of collaboration and influencing others who have no obligation to you and your bright, shiny idea. The other thing is about communication. Amazon's a writing culture, and you don't go there's a peculiar part of an Amazon meeting is you generally don't start talking when a meeting starts. You're reading for the first 10 minutes or so a doc that frames what we're about. And so because we're a writing culture, number one, you can't hang on to papers as long as we used to hang on to papers at school, or as long as we used to, I think about our dissertations, as long as we think about our dissertations about this particular chapter, we can't hang on to them. You got to get it out. And you're always having to adapt to different audiences, and you might have to revise a paper, write a paper in a different way for a different audience. So writing becomes a key. And so as a, you know, again, thinking about the skills that the Carter School has prepared us, if you're writing well, that's one skill you need to highlight and bring forward. But even today, after a book being published, several journal articles being published, I'm always having to think about, how do I raise the bar to communicate, to make sure what I need to say is communicated to this audience. And so it's a continual process of improvement for me. On to Lisa.
I think that since finishing the PhD, one of the things that I've really enjoyed quite a lot in this new position is the opportunity to do collaborative research and more collaborative writing projects, book projects, these kinds of things, of working with my colleagues and peers. And I think that kind of speaks back to some of what we were talking about earlier in terms of networking and mentorship, of building those kinds of relationships with people and being then able to collaborate with your mentors or with your academic friends. So a great thing that's come out since finishing a PhD is working on like a book project with my academic friends, including some former Carter School folks like Scheherazade Jafari, who I'm working with on a book project right now that we're submitting this weekend. Yay. Anyway, so that's been really nice of of being able to collaborate with people and consider how we can bring our different skill sets together to conduct research, to do really innovative work, to write and communicate with a broader audience. And so I've really loved that part of the post-PhD world. Yeah, thank you.
Lisa, it sounds like you have a very busy week. You were at a gala yesterday. You have an event later today. You're submitting a book this weekend.
I'm a little tired.
Very exciting.
Thanks.
Thank you. For me, I would say working in the government, that you have to be really sensitive about how your audience, whoever you're speaking to, receives the information and how they would like to receive the information and how they're most comfortable. And you have to try to communicate it, your message, whatever it is, in as many different formats and ways as possible. So that could be like messaging, instant messaging, Facebook, and email, and on a conference call, and in an in-person meeting. You have to literally check every single box and make sure that you've communicated as many different ways as possible, the same exact message. And it can be pretty overwhelming to try to communicate in so many different ways the same exact message, and you have to make sure you remember what you say to one group as opposed to another group, and make sure that the message is exactly the same, because otherwise it comes back and hits you in the face, and they're like, wait, we thought this. And it can be very, very messy in the government when you don't realize how people are perceiving your message. So you kind of learn by trial and error and hope you don't get fired, basically. So let's go on to actually kind of the same realm: ethical dilemmas and decision-making. Describe instances where you faced ethical dilemmas in your career. How did you approach these situations, and what ethical considerations do you find important to navigate in your field? Let's start with John.
I'm going to ask for a pass on this one. I'm a veteran of the Iraq and Balkan Wars, and that experience created a lot of ethical dilemmas for me personally, and which is why I ended up at the Carter School. So if you don't mind, I'll pass it on to Sandra.
Is it too much to have 2 passes in a row? I'll give it a no. That's a really good question. And the dilemma I have in mind, I'm not sure if it's quite an ethical one, but it is a dilemma that I had to face right as I was wrapping up the PhD. I had the opportunity actually to pursue a postdoc, and within the month of finding that out, I was able to I received this positive response from USIP about this role within the Learning Evaluation and Research team, and so I had to make a decision as to whether or not to pursue a path towards academia that would have definitely set me up more in an academic future relative to the more practitioner route I'm currently on. And that took a while. It took a lot of me to, first of all, make decisions around what it is, trying to clarify and distill in my mind what it is that I'm interested in doing. What are the options before me, and how do I ensure that I make that knowing what opportunities it opens up. The postdoc would have definitely set me up for more academic routes down the line, whereas this practitioner route sets me up for more practitioner oriented kinds of work, where I'm using more of the technical skills of what I've gained in my PhD, especially given the nature of this role. And I had to weigh out, what Lisa mentioned earlier, that academic jobs are becoming much more rare as well. And so it's not guaranteed, even if you do have a postdoc, that you'll have more of an opportunity. It's still a competitive market. It's a small market, but also a competitive one. And a postdoc doesn't necessarily give you significantly added advantages. And so I think that process of trying to figure out what was the best route for me took a while, and it took a lot of tapping into networks and allies and supporters to help me decide which way to go. In terms of dilemmas that I face at work currently, I think a lot of it has to do with perhaps trying to find a good balance between to what extent kind of do you provide support to ensure that colleagues have what they need to be able to do the research projects they have in mind, and to what extent do you allow the opportunities for teams to kind of learn the basics of what it means to be a researcher, to do research, and to have them kind of take that lead. And so trying to balance, to what extent are you teaching, and to what extent are you allowing others to learn as well and to teach themselves, I think is one of those areas where I'm trying to balance my role as someone who's supporting research at the institute, knowing that there's a wealth of experiences and knowledge as well. So it's not just me providing research, but others also bringing different perspective and dimensions into research projects that are of equal value, right? And so figuring out where to put more emphasis and more balance is an ongoing consideration on my end. I'll pass it on to Lisa.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, that's that pathway of, or that dilemma of trying to decide this way or that way, and the uncertainties that lie before both of those choices. It's a hard decision. Do you feel like you're really happy with the decision that you made ultimately?
I am. I really am. I'm very happy with where I am now. And fun enough, it ended up being such a small circle. I ended up so I guess if there was an ethical dilemma, it was the fact that I'd already accepted the postdoc before the USIP position came up, and so I had to decline the postdoc. But fun enough, the world was just such a small world. I ended up meeting the person actually who took over the postdoc position, and we get along very well. So we're interested in as well continuing to see where we could go professionally in terms of writing together and just keeping in touch. So it's kind of a funny way of how that particular experience is still part of my life in ways that I did not expect it to be. So yeah, very grateful for that.
Yeah, that's so great. Yeah, I think maybe I was a little bit more like, I don't know, pessimistic in my last comment. I do admit, apologies. I am pretty tired today. This has been a really busy week. But I guess what I had been wanting to get at when I was talking about the academic job market and uncertainties and these kind of things, not to spend too much time on this, and I know this is a little bit different from the subject of our current question here, but just on what Sandra was saying, is that yeah, I don't know, in watching a lot of my friends make different kinds of choices about their careers going forward, I've seen people end up in this moment of finding whatever combination of research or practice or teaching that they find that people are largely reporting being really happy with the choices that they've made. Maybe that speaks to, Charles, what you were saying too, that people end up in places that they're really confident and happy with. And that's part of what gives me a little bit of, when I'm feeling that fear and uncertainty about what might lie after my contract is over, that's what also brings me some, some solace that, well, I'll find that medium, or that happy medium of whatever combination that looks like going down the road. For ethical dilemmas in my work, I've considered this, and I partly want to pass to, but I'll kind of speak to it a bit, I suppose, of saying that I guess teaching, there's different kinds of ethical dilemmas that we can encounter, certainly in terms of the kind of weight that a lot of students are carrying on their shoulders right now in the context of high school students coming out of the pandemic and all of the hardship that they've gone through during the pandemic, and being disconnected and maybe not having the same kinds of academic preparatory experiences. A lot of people do, young people are experiencing a great deal of crisis in undergraduate, at the undergraduate level right now. And so I suppose in teaching undergraduates, because I'm at an undergraduate liberal arts college, some of the dilemmas that come with this work are like, what kind of support can be provided? How do we build in different kinds of flexibility in our role, in our teaching? How do we meet standards of academic excellence while also not, adding to the kinds of struggles that people are experiencing, not only related to the pandemic, but also we're having as I'm sure is the case in the United States too, of housing and economic crises here in Canada. It's so expensive to live. Students are having to work so much more while they're taking their undergraduate degrees than they have in the past. Like, I know we all perhaps, worked in our undergrads, but I think that the economic pressures are just getting more acute with young people. So yeah, we encounter those kinds of challenges. And certainly I think the kind of, social justice oriented teaching and learning that we've done in the Carter School, the building some of the capacities of reflexivity, and also, growing up around academic excellence. I feel like the combination of skills coming out of a peace studies program really I draw upon and are helpful to me in working with students who are oftentimes grappling with really difficult situations. So that's what I would say for that. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's move on to networking and building professional relationships. Discuss the importance of networking in your career journey. How have you built and maintained professional relationships since leaving the Carter School? Share strategies for effective networking and leveraging these connections. And I would like to say, as far as mine goes, honestly, I think social media is like hugely changed this. And it's just been so monumental when it comes to networking and building relationships. I think it's a great tool, and it just expands your world, and learning how to use it effectively is a very valuable skill. And I will start with John.
So Cindra, I have to agree that for me, LinkedIn as a place, because I find because there's another question about burnout and working hard and all of this stuff. If I've shut off some of the other social media accounts because they've become just a distraction, and so the only social media that I maintain sort of an active app on my phone, if you will, is LinkedIn. And it's really, frankly, the only reason that's there is so that I can reach out or can be reached to by people that want to reach out and I want to reach out to. And then beyond that is making sure that we're spending time in person with that person, or calling that person, or Charles gets oddball hour texts from me, and he certainly can do the same back to our friendship that spawned at the Carter School and at Nats Park. We won't tell why that was so significant at Nats Park, but that those friendships that we kindled at school remain valuable. But more importantly, that those platforms just, for me, become just a tickler to stay connected. The real connection has to be spending time with those people in your network, calling them, talking to them, meeting them when you can find time, and then fostering those relationships. What about you, Lisa? What do you think about staying connected?
Yeah, I have some, profiles and stuff. I really dislike being online in general. So I guess what I would say, kind of speaking to something that Sandra mentioned earlier about really valuing those academic friendships, like you mentioned Adomi, who is just the best person. It's just such a wonderful human being. And I think that you just can't I can't say enough how the friendships that came out of the PhD program, of people that you were in, my own cohort or in other cohorts, it's just been so important, like for surviving a PhD program for one, bouncing off ideas, and then after, we still talk. Sometimes we go on vacation together. We I don't know, just there's been so much benefit that's come out of those relationships of co-authoring things together, doing projects together, checking in, telling one another about jobs and opportunities, connecting with different kinds of contract work, all of these things. It's just really valuing those relationships that come out of the school, the Carter School now, I think is just, you can't say enough about how important that is on the academic trajectory and the PhD and afterwards. So that's what I'll say about networking, not just the people who are, the leaders in the field, but the people who are around you are so important. So Sandra, what do you think?
I think that's a lot. I don't have much to add, but to second what you've shared, I think one area I would note is, yes, the importance of prioritizing building those relationships, right? I think I had a hard time getting on board with networking because it seemed very extractive as an idea, but it really doesn't have to be that way. It's about building relationships and getting to know these people who you share mutual interests with, right? And so realizing that there's value as well that you add to these relationships, and not just think of it as an extractive relationship where you're trying to get somewhere or to learn something, but that you're trying to build your understanding and your knowledge of an area, and that the person you're networking with is also able to learn from you and to contribute to what you're trying to do. One thing I would say around networking in general, given just the difficulty of job markets, I think people underutilize like reaching out to people who work in similar areas or who do similar things you're interested in, reaching out and asking for coffee, for just getting to learn about what they do, right? It doesn't have to mean like I'm trying to connect with you because of this particular job. It could be simply connecting with you because we work in similar areas and I'm really interested in kind of the work you do, right? So don't underestimate the value of just reaching out and connecting with people, because I think that's really important. Whether you do that virtually or in person, highlight that. And then one thing on LinkedIn, I have to say, I also don't use any of my other social media because I find it just too consuming, but I do use LinkedIn. And one thing, when you're reaching out and connecting with people, someone who used to be a career advisor told me once, like, if you're sending an invite to someone you don't know, and even if it's someone you know, you always need to add a note. So this is like a minor advice, but like if you're connecting with someone, just add a note, right? Because it sometimes reads very, very abrupt to just send a LinkedIn connection request to someone you don't know. So just noting that for those who may be interested in connecting more via LinkedIn.
I guess I would add one last thing
to wrap up now.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay.
Just by quarter, so.
Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
I guess just thinking about what you were saying about building these kinds of networks in a non-extractive way, that if the kinds of networks that are built that are more, I guess, organic, can be really, it can be really, really helpful. So for example, when I was in my PhD, I organized a panel for National Women's Days conference. And I invited somebody who's a significant scholar in the field here in Canada. Turns out she's at the university that I'm at right now. But I just had read one of her papers and loved it and wanted her to be on my panel, and she agreed to be on the panel, which was so great. But it was just from that and having a really nice conversation with her. I didn't have any agenda behind here of, oh, she's going to be able to fix my career for me or something like that, or connect me in some kind of a way. I just really loved her work. And so because we were able to have a conversation, I think that was more organic and not that kind of extractive approach. We became more colleagues and friends. She collaborated with me on a number of other events that I organized. And then she wrote a really strong job letter for me that landed me this job that I'm in right now. And she's become like one of the most central mentors that I have. And it was that kind of really organic kind of approach. And so that I would say that was an approach that really worked for me, and that it feels more comfortable for me to do that than to, set up these kinds of awkward meetings and ask somebody to connect me or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna go through each panelist. If you'd like to say any final words of advice or whatever you'd like to say, how about final words from John?
So I thought a PhD would be the pinnacle of learning, and that I didn't need any more learning. Not that's not what I mean. I mean, like, from a certification sort of perspective. But believe me, my queue of Kindle books, of audiobooks, of podcasts, of Udemy courses is stacked up, that I am always trying to learn. And I think the benefit of coming from the Carter School, and it was what attracted me to the Carter School, is that you're multidisciplined, and being able to reach across so many disciplines has enabled me to adapt to these changing career conditions. And so embrace that, and don't be afraid to spread wide.
Awesome, thank you. Sandra, final words?
Yeah, kind of along the same lines as John. It's always good to have a plan and to have an objective, right? But leaning on that flexibility that you have and the interdisciplinary background you bring into whatever space you're in, and be okay with change and uncertainty. It's actually not an easy thing for me to say, because I do not do well with uncertainty, but it really does help you when you're flexible and you're able to see where things go, right? As making sure that you amass all the information you can to be able to make informed decisions and to have plans B, C, and so forth. Just be flexible and realize that there's no one clear path, right, that leads you to where you want to go. But I think being creative and being flexible and being resilient all help.
Lisa, final words?
I don't really have any pearls of wisdom, I suppose, to share. Just that it's been really nice being able to have a conversation with you folks. And so thanks, Cindra and Charles, for the invitation to come and have a conversation. I think I'll just leave it in case anybody wants to have any questions or discussions now.
Any questions from the group? Final questions? Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending. If you'd like to reach out, let us know. This has been such a huge inspiration for me, and I hope it's been inspirational for you all. And hopefully we'll see you soon in other events for the Carter School. Thank you, everyone.